Hello, back to Bergson and the Holographic Theory of Mind, ongoing series. This is part 24, Zen, the Brain, and Bergson. We'll be talking about the Zen Enlightenment, enlightenment experience, content and nature thereof, the brain structure and dynamics underlying Zen, James Austin's extensive neural explication in this regard, and as usual, Bergson as the missing framework and essential to actually understand what's going on. A little bit of the subject of beyond Zen, the Yogis, ether, and taken finally to the beyond deep learning and AI. In 1998, James Austin published Zen and the Brain with MIT Press. Austin is an MD. He was and still is, I believe, Professor Emeritus of Neurology at the University of Colorado School of Medicine. He did over 140 academic articles on neurology, neurochemistry, and his book is massive, 844 pages. It held the history of Zen, a discussion of brain and neuroarchitecture, fundamentals, 145 pages. His own Zen experiences, some of them in Kyoto, Japan, and a brilliant exposition, in my opinion, of the neurodynamics underlying Zen experience, or Satori, or Kensho. He's born in 1925, which makes him 93 or so today, and he's still going. To me, Austin's model is striking and entirely obscured by the metaphysic in which he himself worked. Zen is not a dogma. It is not a theology. It is a technique. It is a method, a practice. And depending on the will and desire of the practitioner, intense, and even more intense. It is profound concentration. On what? On a koan. So here are some examples of koans. Who is it that sees? What was your original face before you were born? What is the sound of one hand clapping? All things are reducible to the one, but where does the one return to? Mu, just the word mu. This was Master Chao Chu's answer to, does a dog have Buddha nature? You don't crack the koan cracks you. This is because there's no intellectual, rational, conceptual solution to the koan. The answer must be direct. The answer must be experienced. The Zen literature abounds with examples of the intense states of concentration that students have entered. Example, when Hakuin was 24, he was concentrating so intensely on his koan mu that he could not sleep. Having also forgotten to eat and to rest, he commented later that it was as though I were frozen solid in the midst of an ice sheet extending tens of thousands of miles. To all extents and purposes, I was out of my mind, and mu alone remained. Cheat sheets, or answer books, have been created. After a session of meditation, a student might try to fool the Zen master, the Roshi, to prove his or her realization. Now, why one would do this, I have no clue, but obviously people have tried it. So a Roshi question might be, what does mu look like from the back when the student arrives claiming he's achieved the Zen realization? What does mu look like from the back? The cheat sheet advises to turn around and present one's back. Another Roshi question, show me the sound of one hand. The cheat sheet advises thrusting forth one hand. The Roshi sees through these effortlessly. That is, he sees through the student's state of being. What are these Zen journeys like and the answers achieved? We'll give a sketch of a couple from the great book, The Three Pillars of Zen, by Philip Kapleau. Actually, Roshi Philip Kapleau. Mr. KY, a Japanese executive, age 47. So this is from a letter in November 27th, 1953 to Nakagawa Roshi. The day after I called you, I was riding home in the train, reading a book on Zen by Son O, who was a Zen Master 1688 to 1703. I ran across this line. I came to realize clearly that mind is no other than mountains and rivers and the great wide earth, the sun and the moon and the stars. I was startled. I said, after 7 or 8 years, I finally perceived the essence of this statement, and I couldn't suppress the tears. He goes on, at midnight, I abruptly awakened. Suddenly, that quotation flashed into consciousness. Then, all at once, I was struck as by lightning, and the next instant, heaven and earth crumbled and disappeared. Instantaneously, the surging waves, a tremendous delight welled up in me. A veritable hurricane of delight, and I laughed wildly. The empty sky split in two, then opened its enormous mouth and began to laugh uproariously. He adds a P.S. Tell that American to vow to attain enlightenment, though it take the infinite, the boundless, the incalculable future. He goes on, next day, November 28th, am supremely free, 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 free. There is no common person. The big clock chimes, but the clock, not the clock, but mind chimes. The universe itself chimes. There is neither mind nor universe. Ding, dong, dong. I've totally disappeared. Buddha is the substance of mind. This is now luminously clear to me. Next day, November 29th. This limitless freedom is beyond all comprehension. Dogen, the great teacher of Buddhism, said, quote, Zen is the wide, all-encompassing gate of compassion. I am grateful, so grateful. Now, Mr. PK, American businessman, age 46, who was that American that KY referred to, said, keep trying no matter what. PK's story starts in April 1953. It continues for 5 years. He tires of mere Zen theory and speculation. In November, he decides he must visit a monastery in Kyoto to get practical understanding and experience. And he ends up in a meditation session. November 3rd, wiggled wordlessly for 2 miserable hours next to P. Concentration impossible. Thoughts chasing each other like a pack of monkeys. Excruciating pain in legs, back, and neck. Desperately want to quit. But if I do before P, he will never quit ragging me, nor will the Roshi have a good opinion of American fortitude. At last, a monk came and whispered, you may see the Roshi now. December 1st, 1953. Raining incessantly. Zendo, Zen meditation, his sessions in the monastery, uncomfortably cold and damp. 2 sweaters and wool robe and 2 pairs of wool socks, but couldn't stop shivering. Godo's bellowing and roaring, more of a distraction than his wallops with the Kyusako. Manipulated my 3 cushions in every way, but couldn't escape pain. So Godo was a Zen assistant, the long stick you see in the right there, the Kyusako, and the meditators get whacked to keep their attention on their koan. Believe it or not, they get quite used to this. At my first Dokusan, Harada Roshi drew a circle with a dot in the center. This dot is you, and the circle is the cosmos. Actually, you embrace the whole cosmos, but because you see yourself as an isolated fragment, you don't experience the universe as inseparable from yourself. You must put your mind in your hara and breathe only mu, in and out. The center of the universe is the pit of your belly, your hara. Mu is a sword which enables you to cut through your thoughts. December 2nd. I told Harada Roshi, the pain in my legs was agonizing. Do you want a chair? He looked at me tauntingly. No, I won't use a chair even if my legs drop off. Good. With that spirit, you're bound to become enlightened. August 1st, 1958. Now we've gone 5 years. He's been doing this now, PK, working at Zen meditation koans, going to sessions in Kyoto for 5 years. So we're 5 years later. Sessions underway. Quickly my concentration became strongly pitched, boring in mu, thinking only of mu, breathing mu. August 4th. Reached a white heat today. Monitors whack me time and again. Their energetic stick wielding is no longer an annoyance but a spur. Raced to see the Roshi. When he asked me to show him mu, spontaneously seized his fan. You are now facing the last and toughest barrier between you and self-realization, said the Roshi. But you must bore tirelessly. August 5th. What happened last night? He began quizzing me. Where do you see mu? How old is mu? What is the sound of mu? Some of my answers came quickly, some haltingly. Then he spoke. There are some Roshi who might sanction such a tip-of-the-tongue taste of Kensho. But, I said, have I labored like a mountain these 5 years to bring forth this mouse? I'll go on. Threw myself into mu for another 9 hours with such absorption that I completely vanished. I didn't eat breakfast. Mu did. I didn't sweep the floors. Mu did. Again and again the monitors whacked me, crying, victory is yours if you don't relinquish your hold on mu. August 5th. Afternoon Dokusan. Hawk-like, the Roshi scrutinized me as I entered his room. The universe is one, he began, each word tearing into my mind like a bullet, the moon of truth. All at once the Roshi, the room, every single thing disappeared in a dazzling stream of illumination, and I felt myself bathed in an unspeakable delight. For a fleeting eternity, I was alone. I alone was. Then the Roshi swam into view. Our eyes met and flowed into each other, and we burst out laughing. Now, James Austin himself meditated for a long time. He himself had been drawn to Japan, to Kyoto, and began studying Zen. So this experience here is the result of a long period of time in Zen meditation. Though he wasn't as dedicated as our previous Mr. PK was, he nevertheless continued it on. So he writes, it strikes me unexpectedly at 9 a.m. on the surface platform of the London subway system. Due to a mistake, I wind up at a station where I have never been before. The view is the dingy interior of the station, some grimy buildings, a bit of open sky. I idly survey the scene. Instantly, the entire view acquires three qualities: absolute reality, intrinsic rightness, ultimate reflection. With no transition, it is all complete. Yes, there is the paradox of this extraordinary viewing, but there is no viewer. The scene is utterly empty, stripped of every last extension of an I, me, mine, which is his name for the ego self, aspects of the ego self, the I, what is me and what belongs to me. Vanished in one split second is the familiar sensation that this person is viewing a city scene. The new viewing proceeds impersonally, not pausing to register the paradox that there is no human subject doing it. Three insights penetrate the experient, as he terms the experiencer, each conveying total understanding at depths far beyond simple knowledge. This is the eternal state of affairs. There is nothing more to do. There is nothing whatever to fear. This experience is objective vision. No subject is inside. It lacks all subjective ties. An objective reality exists. In the past, whenever I sensed its presence, I had always considered it at an intellectual level as nature. Now, it is no longer a word, a concept, or a metaphor. It is really real, infinite in scope. I am one grain of sand in all of it. Now, Austin emphasized that a triggering stimulus has been described in Zen for many centuries. For example, Zen Master EQ was out meditating in a rowboat in the middle of Lake Biwa at midnight when an unseen crow flew over and went caw. This was the trigger. He dropped instantly into a profound Satori. Suyun, after meditation, as tea was being poured, boiling water splashed on his hand. His cup dropped and crashed. Instantly he awoke, as from a dream. Siddhartha, the Buddha, meditating beneath the Bodhi tree in the pre-dawn hours, and he looked up and saw the morning star, and became enlightened. Shabkar, a 19th century Tibetan Buddhist. I raised my head looking up and saw the cloudless sky. I thought of absolute space, free from limits, then experienced a freedom without center, without end. Non-Zen triggers abound in a rather famous book, Cosmic Consciousness, by Richard Buck. In a 2011 Google talk at Googleplex, Austin summarizes a neural model of the Zen Enlightenment. I'm starting at a point where he introduces this view of the brain right there in the visual field. He notes the IPS, which my little arrow points to, and your eye has to follow from IPS to the point in the brain where the IPS is. That's the interparietal sulcus, IPS, and that's linked with the FEF, or the frontal eye field. These two together are our two modes of top-down attentiveness. Now, top-down attentiveness is a form of attention that's driven by us consciously to focus on a task, whether it be hammering a nail, stirring coffee, whatever. These two modes are in a position to be overlapped by what's termed the egocentric pathway of processing, or the E pathway, running along the dorsal or top back of the brain. These two, egocentricity and top-down attentiveness, are very easy to integrate into one giant function. So he is starting to build and describe the neural structure that creates our sense of I, or individual identity. Lower down is the TPJ, or temporal parietal junction. This includes the superior temporal gyrus and the supramarginal gyrus, not noted here, but he noted this. And this temporal parietal links up with the same network and circuitry with the inferior frontal cortex, or the IFC there, which is farther forward in the brain. So this lower or ventral mode of processing is quite close, as you can see, to the green area, or the other centered mode, the non-egocentric mode, the A or allocentric mode of processing reality. And here, then, we have the contrast to the I or ego mode, the base for awareness of the entire surrounding environment or field in which the I is actually embedded. The four quadrants of vision are shown. The red rim, the lower half of the visual field. This is because the egocentric pathway starts at the upper part of the occipital lobe, and it's much more efficient at processing things below the horizon. On the left, for example, the red bottom left, if you're balancing a baby on your lap, it's important to be using these, touch and proprioception, to hold the baby accurately so it does not fall. On the right, the hammer, holding a hammer in your left hand, it's important to have proprioception and touch so you don't smash your finger. So the E pathway is highly specialized for action. It depends on the parietal lobe for proprioception and touch skills. And note, the objects that it handles are down close to it in its peripersonal space, the envelope of space right around us, within reach. So the egocentric pathway is closely related to our action in our personal space and therefore our identity. The allocentric pathway, which starts also at the lower part of the occipital lobe, is more efficient in processing things in the higher part of the visual field, above the horizon, detecting the tiger in the leaves of the trees and at a distance, or scanning the horizon. Now here we have a functional MRI scan. We have the same structures that we noted previously. You have the FEF, or the frontal eye field, the IPS, or the ipsol in the picture, the TPJ, or temporal parietal junction. The interesting thing, the interparietal sulcus, or IPS, is right next to the blue spot, which is the superior parietal lobe, or lobule. And this IPS, or ipsol, is the somatosensory association cortex. This is the part of your brain that understands that you have a trunk, that is your body, and on both sides you have an arm and a leg. It puts these together so you understand and know instinctively that you have a body that you can act with, which will be your agency for working as a unit in the outside world. So again, building this I-centered notion centered on the body. This is where your physical sense of self comes together. Now, Austin wants us to note how handy it is to have your top-down attention mode, or the TPJ, right next to this organizational principle, which enables you to know that you have a whole body scheme with which you can operate in the outside world. Now he talks about bottom-up attention and its processing, where by bottom-up attention, we're meaning attention that's attracted by things, shall we say, happening in the outside world that grab your attention. A bird flies by, etc. This is in the temporal parietal junction of the inferior frontal gyrus, or eye of chi. So pointing where the eye of chi is pointing. The yellow colors are to signify that our top-down attentiveness and our bottom-up attentiveness have to be merged in a very sophisticated manner in order to put together the kinds of attention we need to operate in our daily lives. So the medial frontal gyrus and the inferior frontal gyrus operate particularly on the right side to arrive at this merger of functions that enables us to operate. So top-down attention, as Austin likes to point out, is sharply pointed. It's an exclusive kind of attention. It's being driven by our awareness, by our consciousness to focus on something, whether it be stirring coffee or whatever. Bottom-up attention is a more global kind of receptivity. It also functions at the level of bare awareness and has a subconscious processing aspect also. Everything below this level operates at a subconscious level. It's a level below conscious understanding. So top-down attention, bottom-up attention, again, closely related to the two pathways. So around the turn of the century, 2000 or so, a couple of researchers, Gustard and Reichel, studied a whole set of earlier PET scans. So here we're looking at the inside of the brain on the right, and this is the right hemisphere. The corpus callosum has been cut. It is the bridge between the two hemispheres. And Gustard and Reichel found that there were two hot spots on the inner part of the brain when at rest. It is the subjects were trying to rest, not do anything physically or mentally. So here was a hot spot in the medial posterior parietal cortex, or the PCC. And of course we have the other hot spot in the front there. Notice the other-centered, allocentered pathway, the green arrow line, coming along through the underside part of the medial temporal and occipital cortex. The other major hotspot is in the angular gyrus, right there. And this is also along the E pathway, which leads up to the superior parietal lobule. So at rest, 3 hotspots. Now, give the subject a task that requires them to be introspective, to look into their self. These hotspots become even hotter. Again, they're associated with the egocentric pathway. So various lines of evidence suggest that these hotspots are engaged at least partially in generating our sense of self-identity and relating this identity to our environment in ways to navigate through our environment. So what are these hotspots doing? Well, speculatively, Austin argued, this is how you remember what your bedroom looked like in your early formative years and your years in high school, what your office looks like. This is where you fit into your long narrative history and that part of your environment, which you laid down with circumstantial details so you know how to find your way around that environment. So note, we're not necessarily saying anything stored here. What we're saying is this is the points. These are the points along the pathways that are organizing this complex set of aspects of these memories that all coalesce to form oneself. Give the subject an acute task, one that requires them to be very attentive to their external environment, like walking across a tightrope over a cliff, over a canyon. These hotspots become cooler now. We're focused on the external environment. Keep in mind what we are driving or trying to explain. If the self vacates the center of consciousness, which it does in the Satori, and in the center is an insight that comprehends all things as they really are, and in the absence of self, and if there is no fear and no time, and there's no proprioception, and the physical sense of self is unregistered, and the perfection is registered throughout the outside world at that moment, then how is it possible that such a moment can occur? We need to look at one more aspect of these 3 hotspots in this joint allocentered/egocentered system. So again, Austin noted he was offering a model explanation, and that begins in the thalamus. The thalamus is a paired structure. It has left and right sides. So this is the thalamus over here. And we're looking at the largest nucleus in the whole thalamus, which is the pulvinar, or the red-orange section. And in colors is the most dorsal or upper part of the thalamus. The pulvinar specializes in salience, a quality that enables the foreground item of interest to leap out from the background, then to subside and then become again the background. So the pulvinar is a very smart nucleus that is at the onset of all our perceptions. The other item of interest, the lateral posterior nucleus, the LP right there, it is connected with the superior parietal lobe, or the SPL, and it's where we organize our physical sense of self. In front of that are 3 limbic nuclei of the thalamus, right there. Through these 3 come up all the messages from the hypothalamus, our hippocampus, the amygdala. Our whole emotional life passes through these, and these 3 happen to be the passageway to those 3 hotspots that define or coordinating our sense of self. So first, the dorsal pulvinar, or the tier in the top and back of the thalamus, the D-pole, as we're circling here. The way the circuitry is arranged in the brain, all the information that comes up from the limbic system and comes up in a bottom-up manner and drives our cortex in all its wants and attachments and emotions, all goes through these 3 limbic nuclei in the front of the dorsal thalamus. Then you have the ventral pulvinar and the ventral nuclei here. The ventral pulvinar goes up to the fusiform gyrus, circle up there, and all the other information that passes along the allocentric other form of processing, namely the green arrow, that path that we've noted before. So how is it possible to drop out this dorsal thalamus and therefore rid ourselves of our anxieties, our sense of self, anxieties, of course, being intimately attached to the very structure of the self? So it's not possible without another nucleus in the thalamus, in this case, the reticular nucleus, arrow pointing to it. This fits like a cap over the rest of the thalamus. If you simply slide that reticular nucleus up a little bit, it'll slide right over the colored areas, the violet, blue, green, yellow, and form a cap. And because it has many GABA, or gamma-aminobutyric acid, neurocells in it, it exercises an inhibitory role on the rest of the dorsal thalamus. Because the thalamus and the cortex normally operate in an oscillating mode, quickly back and forth, this reticular cap enables the thalamus to shut down its thalamocortical system via massive inhibitory signals and to cut off our sense of self. The thalamus is important because everything you have just experienced in this YouTube, for example, the visual, the audio, had to go through your thalamus to arrive at your cortical level so you could understand what is going on, with one exception, that being smell. So returning to the scans. On the right, we have the left hemisphere with the frontal on the right, the occipital on the left or the back. Put the nose there so we can see the right. And the PCC is the posterior cingulate cortex, back in the medial parietal lobe. There's an angular gyrus too. So this is a resting scan. And we still have the three major functional hotspots in red there. But now the subjects are inside the scanner for 5 minutes, just sitting there. And we see the hot spots get cooler, and the cool spots get hotter, and then vice versa. So this is an oscillation that is happening about 3 times a minute. This is a slow cycle. It's an endogenous intrinsic cycle of the brain, probably a combination of metabolic cycle and a bioelectric cycle. It's much slower than the breathing rate of 18 times per second. Note on the left, the IPS, which is cooler, and the FEF, the frontal field, which is cooler, and the TPJ, also cooler. All the 3 blue spots are blue bands there. In 20 seconds, things will be different. So 20 seconds later, on the bottom, there's been a spontaneous reciprocal shift. Blue has become orange, and the orange has become blue-green. So are the subjects doing anything? No, this is spontaneous. So again, at bottom, we have the cooler angular gyrus, the medial posterior parietal, the medial prefrontal cortex, all having moved from hot to cool. So with respect to meditation, you've gone on this 7-day retreat. You're very relaxed, receptive, sensitized to your environment, meditating happily. And you've done this not just for a week, but for years. So what would happen if you're just there, relaxed in receptive attentiveness? Well, here you've got the allocentric mode, or A in blue, of other referential attentiveness going up and down, maybe 3 per minute. And of course you've got your egocentric, self-centered mode in red, the red cycle, oscillating in a reciprocal fashion, spontaneously. And all of a sudden, a triggering stimulus comes from the outside. Well, remember Zen Master EQ, who was out meditating in a rowboat in the middle of Lake Biwa at midnight and happily in his normal reciprocal cycle. But an unseen crow flies over and goes "Ka," the trigger, and he drops into Satori, into profound Satori. Why? In the new cycle, via the trigger, allocentric, other referential processing would be captured and very hyperattentive. Thus is allocentric processing, oriented entirely to specifying the field and without the dynamics of the egocentric system, would be at a higher level, the blue cycle. Similarly, in reciprocal fashion, there would be a deactivation of his self-referential or egocentric system in the red. EQ suddenly is in Satori. The self, capital S, mind, the universe, with no center, a Zen Enlightenment. The audience at Googleplex was with certainty unfazed by any negative implications in Austin's talk with respect to their AI paradigm, their general conception of the nature of the brain and mind. In truth, Austin himself was equally unfazed, or would have been. The Google-Knots, as I like to call them, in their intrepid exploration of the neural net concept of the brain, saw only neural nets, an extremely complex system of neural nets, no doubt, but just nets. So too did Austin. To both the Google-Knots and to Austin, the Zen Kensho or Satori or enlightenment is still just experience, albeit denoted as mystical, nevertheless generated by the brain, a purely neural phenomenon. Just like the image of the external world, just like consciousness, that is, just like to them all experience generated by the brain. So they're indirect realists. They'll accept that the world is real. The coffee cup in front of us, the computer, perfectly real. But the experience, the image, is all occurring within the brain. Just keep up their good work on neural net exploration, and Satori too is within the reach of their future neural net architecture. What they saw while Austin talked were nice, unthreatening topics: meditation, stress reduction, creativity enhancement, unthreatening to their general conception of mind and brain. And of course, a little strange no-self experience equally generated by the brain. Austin himself is not a dualist. There is not to him mental and physical, two different categories. He is a monist. His monism is purely materialistic. Perhaps not precisely matter alone is, more like there are only physical states governed by physical laws. He is the classic man of science. For him, consciousness is brain-bound. It is generated by the brain, by the neural nets, by the molecules, by the chemistry, by something in there, in the brain. Ray Kurzweil, now a Google-Knot also, too would have been unfazed. He would still easily see his robots ultimately having spiritual experiences. Yes, even a Satori or two. Why not? Nothing in Austin's conception would threaten this. This is how everyone saw and still sees Zen in the brain. They were wrong. We have seen two extremely complex systems, the egocentric and the allocentric, normally in reciprocal oscillation. The egocentric, an astoundingly complex set of networks. It holds together our body as an object that can be hit, be smashed by cars, run over by dinosaurs. It requires protection. It has a trunk with arms and legs affecting complex spatial motion. with environmental locations, navigation through a complex environment, with a history, with past events, experiences, with a history of thoughts, cognition, even dreams. And the allocentric, vastly more global, embracing, wider, uncentered on the field itself. So we have two different specifications that we've seen on the surrounding field. One is centered on the body, on the I, the ego structure, with all of its history, and one is uncentered, infinite. The egocentric system is a complex, dynamic lens, a lens through which the external field is specified, where there is subject, I/body, and object, external field, objects within that field. Remove the lens. It is a different specification, a specification where subject and object have no distinction. It is like having no head. There's only the specified field with no ego, no I, no sense of one looking at something. This can be seen in Douglas Harding's rather famous book on having no head in his opening discussion. But yet, it is still a specification of the external field. Still a specification of the external field. And the specification is a source of the image of the external world. The Gogelnauts and Dr. Austin have no theory of the origin of the image of the external world, of how the temple is seen out there in volume, in space, the rocks, the trees, or the water ripples, dynamic, ever-changing over time. There is no theory as to how neural networks create the image. No theory of how computers do, or how Python code could, or TensorFlow code. This is the hard problem of Chalmers, the hard problem of consciousness, put more precisely as the problem of the origin of the image of the external world with all of its qualia. And the difficulty lies in the fact that there's no actual concrete dynamics in these models in the first place. They are all and only abstract. Symbols, rules, abstract mathematics, mathematical weightings, derivatives, matrix multiplication, etc. All implementable in any number of devices that can carry out the abstraction, the abstract operations. It is Bergsons model that provides the totally natural basis for Zen. So the essence of Bergsons model, and I apologize to the people who have been watching this series for a while, but since we may have people coming in that are interested in Zen, let me summarize it a bit. What Bergson saw is that the universal field is a holographic field. This was his prescient conception already in 1896, 50 years before the actual discovery of holography. Noting in Matter and Memory that there can be nothing like a photograph, that is an image within the brain corresponding to the external world. For example, an image of a coffee cup on our table, a photograph, so to speak, of a coffee cup on our table inside the brain. He stated, but is it not obvious that the photograph, if photograph there be, is already taken, already developed in the very heart of things and at all points in space? This was his holographic conception. In a hologram, each point carries the information from all other points. There is, so to speak, a photograph of the whole at each and every point in the hologram. Bergson, however, extended this notion already to the universe as a whole. Again, preceding Bohm, who discussed this in 1980. So the universe as a whole is a holographic field, a vast interference pattern, where each point carries the information for the whole. And then Bergson argued, in essence, that the brain is, or creates if you wish, a very concrete modulated reconstructive wave passing through this field, This is not an abstract wave. This is a modulated or concrete wave. One has to visualize the brain with all of its neural networks and all that we today call computations as yet comprising a very concrete wave passing through the holographic field. So what's meant then by modulating the reconstructive wave? Well, my little schema on the right there, if we wanted to store, for example, 3 images, for example, the image of a coffee cup, a wine glass, and then a joint image of a pyramid and ball on a holographic plate, well, what we would do is use what's called a reference wave, which is of a very precise frequency. And we would beam that reference wave through the plate, illuminating the object, for example, the coffee cup, simultaneously, such there's what's termed an object wave bouncing off the cup. And of course, it's formed, so to speak, like the cup. These 2 waves meet at the surface of the plate, object wave and reference wave, forming an interference pattern of the 2 waves. We could do the same thing for the wine glass, using frequency 2 as the reference wave. Again, we would record the interference pattern of the reference wave of frequency 2 with the reflected object wave off the wine glass, again meeting at the surface of the hologram plate. And finally, for the scene, pyramid and ball, using frequency 1, and then recording the object wave interfering with the reference wave of frequency 1, again a very coherent frequency, just using an abstract frequency 1 to represent that. So we'd have 3 interference patterns recorded on the plate from these 3 different scenes or objects. Then what we do is beam what's termed the reconstructive wave back through the plate. So if we beam a reconstructive wave of frequency 1, the original frequency used with the scene, the pyramid and ball, will reconstruct the virtual image of the pyramid and ball. The waves will rise up to the eye of the viewer, and they're specifying the original source of the object wave in depth, in space, the pyramid and ball. If we modulate the reconstructive wave now to frequency 2, we obtain the virtual image of the wine glass. Again, the waves rising to the viewer's eye, specifying the object wave, the original source of those waves, namely the wine glass. And then finally, modulating to frequency 3 will specify via the reconstructive wave rising to the eyes of the viewer the image of the cup. So again, this is the conception, this is the modulation of the reconstructive wave, but we're going to substitute ultimately for the plate, the holographic plate, the interference pattern, the universe itself, a little symbolized image of the universe, and with all points radiating and affecting each other in an interference pattern. And then the brain will be the reconstructive wave passing through this holographic interference pattern, or universal plate, hologram plate, so to speak. So this brain-supported reconstructive wave is specific then to a source within the field, the holographic field. For example, our coffee cup with a stirring spoon. The cup is precisely where it says it is, within the field. This is why it is experienced as unquestionably objective. If you remember Austin in slide 14 talking about this Kensho experience and how everything was experienced so directly and as a totally objective experience. In truth, Austin was expressing his native indirect realism, shall we say, where he's so convinced that the image is inside the brain that he's somewhat taken aback by the fact that it certainly doesn't appear that way in his Kensho experience. Whereas normal people assume that the coffee cup is indeed right there where it says it is, in front of us on the table. So this is what's called direct perception. Perception is direct. We're directly seeing the object, the actual object, where it is, as it is specified to be right external to us in the universal field. And simultaneously then, correspondingly, there is no image of the cup within the brain. The image is not generated by the brain, nor is it within the brain. The brain is simply specific to this source within the external holographic field. Now, the brain's dynamics imposes a scale of time on this field as well. Remember, we're talking a very concrete reconstructive wave that is actually part of a very concrete dynamical device, as dynamic and concrete as an AC motor generating a field of electric force. So normally we perceive a buzzing fly. That's our normal scale of time. But one could alter the energy state of this very dynamic device we call the brain, and time scales could change, and now flies could be specified as slowly flapping their wings, like our butterfly here. The field itself, this holographic field, is transforming continuously in an indivisible or non-differentiable motion. That is, there are no instants, discrete instants in this motion which fall away into the past, where the past is simply our symbol for non-existence. We have true continuity in this motion. It's indivisible. This is an extremely important piece of Bergson's metaphysic. And given this indivisibility of the motion, the fact that there are not instants falling away into the past, there is inherently a primary memory intrinsically within the transformation of the universal field. This allows the specification to be, in fact, to the past, to a past extent of the indivisible transformation of the field. The butterfly being specified there as actually being specified as in terms of its past motions. It's perceived as present because it's simultaneously a reflection of possible action. Now, we've discussed all of this in parts 1, 2, and 3 of this series and its alignment with the great theorist of perception, J.J. Gibson. So there's an unavoidably mystical aspect to this model. In the holographic field, the state of each point reflects the state of all other points in the field. Now, my little symbolic universe up there with 6 points, 6 wave radiating points, has each point reflecting the state of every other point, affecting each other point, reflecting the state of each other point. And the state of each point then reflects in itself its entire history, like a note in a melody, where the note in a melody, even Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, any particular note reflects the preceding series. And if you change the preceding series, the state of that note, that quality of that note changes. So therefore, there's an elementary awareness defined throughout the field at the null scale of time, where the null scale is the most minute possible scale of time imaginable. We're not talking a scale of butterflies or coffee cups. Bergson termed this pure perception. There's a pure perception at the null scale of time defined throughout the field. So the brain specification then is to a time-scaled form of the awareness the perception defined throughout the universal field. Thus, we're not explaining how perception arises in the brain, how the brain generates perception, but rather how perception is limited. But the brain, as a very concrete reconstructive wave, serves as a selection from the vast information in the holographic field, a selection mechanism, or yes, filter, limiting the perception defined throughout the field to a precise specification. And this will lead us, as I'm showing in the right there with the viewer crossed out, to an explanation of why there is no viewer. As in the holographic reconstruction schema, we have a viewer looking at the waves arising from the virtual source. In this case, there will be no viewer, no little homunculus installed in the brain looking at the image. So we will get to that right now in the profound question of the relation of subject and object. So repeating, the brain is specific to a time-scaled form of the awareness defined throughout the universal field, bringing us to subject and object. There is no actual spatial separation between objects, quote unquote, in the field. In fact, objects are transferences of state in the global transformation of the field, like waves in the transforming field. So at the null scale of time, this smallest minute scale of time possibly imagined, our body and a fly are not separate spatially. There's no differentiation, spatial differentiation in the field between our body, say, and a little fly. But now, gradually change, in this case, lower the ratio imposed on field events, the minute field events, even molecular vibrations, shall we say, by the brain. So lower the ratio imposed in field events by the brain. Then the fly will transition from a non-differentiated set of waves within the field in which we are part, to a whirling ensemble of electrons. Then, as we keep changing this ratio, a motionless, vibrating crystalline being. Then a being flapping his wings, slowly like a heron. And then the buzzing being of normal scale. In this, subject is differentiating from object, but only in terms of time. The spatial distinction or differentiation has not, or the unity thereof has not been broken. So for Bergson, as he put it, questions relating to subject and object, to the distinction in the union, must be put in terms of time rather than of space. So in this conception, the viewer is gone. There is no viewer. The brain is specific to a time-scaled form of the awareness defined throughout the field, where even that little buzzing fly is a time-scaled form of awareness defined throughout the field. So the Zen Satori is a specification of the field of pure perception, sans without the dynamic lens that is the egocentric system. This field is mind. It feels entirely objective because it is. It is the objectively existent external field of the universe. The field is, to harken back to a Zen koan, your face before you, the I, were born. Subject and object have dissolved. Samsara, our everyday ecological world with a subject, namely us, surrounded by objects, is nirvana, just without the dynamic lens of the ego applied. Or as the Buddha put it, samsara is nirvana. Without the egocentric system, sans this dynamic lens, The state of non-differentiation from the surrounding field is the default. It is where we begin as infants. Bergson noted in Matter and Memory, within the ever-changing matrix of the external world, the body is eventually identified as the invariant system within the external world. Our identity settles upon it, and thus we begin to need that koan. Implication: the I is itself but a form of invariance over the dynamic transformations or the flow of the external universal field of which we are an intrinsic part. With Austin, we have glimpsed how incredibly complex, how brilliantly designed is the brain to maintain this ego system. Now, there's recent reviews I looked at on Amazon, a few that will say, well, his neuroscience is outdated, and though we should just ignore him. But firstly, the structures he described that we just went over in 2011, not that far away in the past, are in actuality quite basic. And secondly, the major import of his book was never understood in the first place. So outdated is an extremely doubtful worry. Unfortunately, Dr. Austin worked within the classic metaphysic. His book had just 2 references to Bergson, both inconsequential. Something about intuition. Yes, my rat is an extreme Bergsonian. Perhaps he was the most meticulous in the reduction of spiritual experience to merely an epiphenomenon of the material brain. But this continues, of course, in full force. We have Sam Harris, Kurzweil, Dennett, even Dan Brown in his recent book, Origin. So yes, there are many more neural findings: ray meditation, mindfulness, stress, anxiety reduction, creativity, etc. The book Siddhartha's Brain of 2016 is chock full of these. But the focus, despite proffering to be an explanation of enlightenment, is heavily on these subjects: mindfulness, creativity, not enlightenment. Only in a few pages in chapter 5 does this book even vaguely and without much comprehension approach, barely, the dynamics underlying enlightenment described by Austin. You can see the ghost of it there. But Austin is unreferenced. Kingsland, too, by the way, is also an avowed materialist. So, for Kingsland in this book, or A Spiritual Experience, Buddhists learn how the brain is tricking them, yet with no theory of consciousness, no solution to the hard problem. This is rather enormous presumption to be the certain when you cannot solve the hard problem. You have no idea where the image of the external world came from in the first place. But this is endemic. So he somersaults to incorporate the Buddhist experience, yes, real experience of past life memories, of remembering past lives. This awareness happens to be one of the great expositors of meditation, Patanjali's, a couple thousand years ago, siddhis, that is, powers gained in or via meditation. So Kingsland thinks somehow it must be via the DNA. In other words, DNA is given the power to encode and store the experience of an entire lifetime, somehow. No, DNA does not have the representational power for this. That's magic. But Bergson's memory is 4-dimensional due to the indivisibility of the transformation of time, the non-differentiability of time transformation. We are 4-dimensional beings. So with this framework, we can at least get a glimmer of how a being could redintegrate via the brain as a modulated reconstructive wave experiences from even deeper in the past, beyond this particular form in this particular life. Sam Harris also has extensive meditation experience, just like Austin did. He describes this in his book, Waking Up, in 2015. Intense practice, gurus, multiple visits to India, Kathmandu, discussions of Buddhism. Very impressive. And his thesis is simple. The essence of spirituality is the realization that the I is an illusion. That is very Zen-like. Yet for Sam, as a neuroscientist trained, it's the brain, the material brain, that is generating consciousness. The very consciousness that he extols, that's all that's left once there's the disappearance of the I. So we're forced to ask this question, what actually is the spiritual? Just why should we care if we penetrate beyond the brain's craftily generated experience of the I, say by continuous use of a koan to break this crafty experience? For Harris, for Sam, perhaps we're not as anxious. Or perhaps we might love a bit more, show more compassion, more Buddhist compassion. But this is still just a big so? So what? It's all just the material world. Spirituality is just a form of the always and only very impermanent material world. So what we have is the Harris vacuum, a spiritual vacuum. It's the vacuuming of spirit out of any spiritual practice, out of the universe. It's the spiritual vacuum hiding beyond the achievement of an insight into the I illusion, or Satori, or enlightenment, or any spiritual practice or experience whatsoever. Now, I didn't note this, so I have to put it in a little box here, as I was describing Bergson, that implicit in what we discussed is that matter and spirit are two poles in the continuum of the universe, of this field. Matter is a special case of spirit. Or, to put it another way, the classic metaphysic at which science works is a special case of the temporal metaphysic, where we got a hint of the temporal metaphysic in noting that the time transformation of the universal field is indivisible or non-differentiable, and that therefore the instants that classic metaphysic notes, the instants of time, are merely derivatives, abstract derivatives in this very concrete transformation. This is the essence of the temporal metaphysic, in which the classic metaphysic becomes nothing but a special case. So he gives a very brief space to an alternative, where the brain is merely a filter of consciousness that is already independently existing consciousness, just filtering this all through already independently existing consciousness. So in this context, he notes Bergson as one of the exponents of this view, and this view is quickly dismissed due to his non-understanding of the filter, that is, his non-understanding of Bergson's holographic reconstructive wave model of the brain. Again, the brain forming a reconstructive wave within the universal holographic field. So as usual, he just joins the philosophers who have zero comprehension of Bergson. So Sam has placed a materialistic constraint, a material vice, as it were, on the spiritual. And this gives him, or allows him to give no credence to anything beyond this limited realm of his materialistic vice. But beyond this vice, in Dr. Harris, the experience and teachings of a Yogananda, Ananda Mahima, or other Indian saints, for starters. But for Harris, this is a territory of unverified stories or myths. Perhaps true, perhaps not. These saints are unabashed devotees of the divine, however, and they offer much to fill the vacuum. In other words, to bring back the spirituality vacuumed out by Harris and Austin and Kurzweil, etc., 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 as this mode of thinking about spirituality is endemic. So we'll return to this. Zen employs the metaphor of the ox, or the stages of the ox. And in this aspect of Zen, it appears to be conducive to or encourage this reductionist idea, this endemic reduction. If we begin with stage 3, seeing the ox, this denotes our first glimpse of the realm beyond the manifestation of a form, maybe our first initial kensho. Stage 4 is grasping the ox, owning the realization, making it more permanent. The Master Hakun that we talked about described 25, or stated he had 25 or so kenshos. Again, the idea being to make this realization ever more oneself, more permanent. Stage 5 is taming the ox. Stage 6, riding the ox, where enlightenment and ego are seen as one and the same. Stage 7 is forgetting the ox. And stage 8, forgetting the ox and oneself. So in the 10-stage picture here, stage 8 is the empty circle already on the second row in the middle. We've forgotten the ox and oneself. Nothing there. Stage 9 is where enlightenment is no longer differentiated from non-enlightenment. That is, one is not preferred over the other. And at stage 10, one sees or one moves as oneself among ordinary people in our ordinary ecological world, ecological perceptual world, helping others, free from all attachment to enlightenment, which is to say we're back to samsara equals nirvana. That is, our standard ecological perception as seen as equivalent to nirvana, because in truth, they're both based on the same basis of specification of this world, of this universe, of the field of mind. So this is Zen's almost prosaic view. And one can see how it tends to play along, apparently, with the kind of reductionism that Sam Harris would express. But it's this near unidimensional enlightenment to enlightened normality all there is. I've been using the term field as in specification of a source within the field. We of course can ask, what is a field? Pure physics has no real answer to this question. A group of particles does not make a field. So a shot at this question was taken in numbers 18 and number 22, or Tesla 2. The point here, the field is the ether, with its dimensions, the dielectric, magnetic, counter space, counter time. And as we saw, the ether is the source of motion, force, electromagnetism, space itself. And then we've seen, as per Bergson, this field, this ether, is equally mind, pure perception. It has the elementary attributes at minimum of mind defined throughout. Memory and awareness. Yet in Zen, the I, the ego, resolves to the field. So can we not wonder if the brilliant, incredible dynamical structure that is the brain holds a consequence, holds an effect for such a resolution to or identification with this field? So this statement always struck me. It is found in the autobiography of a yogi by Yogananda. And it's in the context of the great master, yogic master Babaji, meeting his sister Mataji to tell her of his intention to cast off his body, or his physical form, as described by a witness to the scene. And she asks him why he wants to do this, and he says, "What is the difference if I wear a visible or an invisible wave on the ocean of my spirit?" Now this is identification, complete oneness with the universal field. or with God. And this is where we transition, for one example, then to the yogis. Yogananda, who is aware of every conversation of his disciples. If you search through the books on Yogananda by his disciples, you'll discover this, that he was quite aware of every conversation that they had. Or Ananda Mayama, a great saint who Yogananda describes visiting, who purportedly held a train engine at the station, spinning its wheels while she purchased a ticket to go visit someone she knew was in need. Or Baba Lokanath, who started meditating when he was age 11 with his guru, and meditated virtually the entire day, as far as I can ascertain, for years, and who purportedly walked through the flames of a forest fire, picked up another monk, as that monk recounted it, and walked out. Or recently, the book by Om Swami, who meditated for a year in the Himalayas, high Himalayas, 13 to 22 hours a day. This tradition includes the famous sutras of Patanjali, as I noted, and his siddhis, which are the resultants of concentrated meditation, clairvoyance, past life perception, levitation, mastery over the elements. This is enlightenment. This is the Zen Enlightenment, with the unemphasized in Zen aspect, power added. Or in the same vein, Alexander David Neal's discussion of the floating levitating monks of Tibet in the book The Mystics and Magicians of Tibet. And one can see David Wilcock's discussion in the Horsfield's Investigations on this phenomenon. Or close to it, the book Levitation by Steve Richards. Or the many descriptions of similar things with Christian mystics, Teresa of Avila, Joseph of Cupertino, etc. We can ignore all this and simply accept the constraint on theoretical pursuit, the vice, or the vacuum on the spiritual. Or we can take it as a pointer to a vast subject of knowledge yet to be understood. So all this, particularly the power add, is a vast subject. Bergson's framework forms the basis for the deep reality of Zen and enlightenment, that we indeed dwell in mind, that the body serves as a focus for mind, that we are mind, or another way of putting it, that we are intrinsic participants in cosmic being. We are focuses of cosmic being, being cosmic in extent, and that this is not an illusion or trick of the brain. So there's a chant in the Heart Sutra in Buddhism, Gate Gate Para Gate Parzam Gate Bodhisvaha, or beyond, beyond, far beyond, totally beyond, O enlightenment. One translation. And Ray, beyond Zen, the point here is simple. The nature, it is the physics, the dynamics of the field of which our body and mind is an intrinsic participant. This is paramount. This has to be understood. And with this, we go beyond, beyond, totally beyond the current, sadly, even dangerously limited conceptions of AI and modern neuroscience on mind and being. So down the road, still looking at temporal consciousness on the list, philosophical treatment thereof, more on current memory research and its relationship to Bergson physics and the use of the holographic principle. Time travel, can we do it? Yes, no, partially, or, of course, something else. Because always something comes along and hits me. So next, we'll see. Till then, signing off.